Hi there, I'm Jason Olson and the purveyor of the blog site cocktailconfessions.com. One of the things I really enjoy as a personal hobby is cooking and entertaining. I also enjoy a really good barbecue. So I wanted to create a video to capture my first attempt at smoking a beef brisket and to share it with all of you. I apologize up front for the many uhs, ums, and few of the stutterings you might hear during my unscripted recording. I've decided to break this series into multiple parts. Part 1 is about selecting a beef brisket and its initial preparation. Part 2 will deal with the rub and the marinade, and finally, Part 3 will be a time-lapsed capture of the many-hour smoking process and finishing it off. Hopefully you'll enjoy these videos and learn as much as I did in the process. Please feel free to leave any feedback at my site, cocktailconfessions.com, or send me a personal email at cocktails1@hotmail.com. Thank you, and now enjoy Part 1.
Okay, here we are. We're going to take a look at our meat here today, our brisket. Right here what I have is a 6.62 pound of beef brisket. It's USDA choice brisket inspected, and the way you can tell generally is the way that this is wrapped. A lot of times you're going to find a purple marking on here that says USDA. It's inspected and passed by the federal government. If you don't have wrapping on it and you were go to a mom and pop butcher shop, there might be some ink stamping on that. Many grocery stores are going to carry briskets, but generally the ones that you're going to find in the meat department have already been trimmed. They take out the majority of the fat that you actually see here, and those are for different type of recipes, and they're a lot smaller. These type of briskets, you generally have to ask for the grocery store butcher there to bring them out from the back. Sometimes a lot of the chain grocery stores, like here in California, where we have Ralph's and Pavilions and Vons and Safeway, you can ask for these, and they usually get one or two of them per week in the back. Depending on the size of the store, they might actually have more. The packaging that this is wrapped in is called Cryovac. It's a little bit thicker than the actual saran wrap that you'd find in your deli cases here, and that's how they. It's a little vacuum packed here, and this comes straight from the meat processing plant. If you were to go to a mom and pop store, your local neighborhood butcher, you might be able to find the same type of thing, but you're going to probably pay a little bit more. At Ralph's, I was actually able to get this on sale at $4.99 a pound. Generally, that's an average price. This size here at $4.99, this cost me just over $33, roughly about 34 bucks. Generally, if you went to a more reputable mom and pop or a local small town butcher, you probably end up paying a little bit more, possibly upwards of $6.99 or more. This is kind of a double-edged sword on this one between the grocery store and the mom and pop butcher shop. Yes, at the grocery store you're going to find a cheaper price of meat. Generally that's due to bulk discounting or volume discounting. However, the drawback to that is you're not going to get that much of a selection. And a lot of times, like I said, they've already trimmed the fat off, so you specifically have to ask for these. If you were to go to a actual mom and pop butcher, the chances of you having more of a selection are greater. The butcher is probably going to know a little bit more about the meats. The meat's probably going to be slightly higher quality. That is, it's probably fresher. They probably know exactly what farm it came from or what slaughterhouse it came from. And the butcher might even be able to tell you how this piece of beef was raised, whether it was grain-fed or corn-fed or full of hormones or not. A lot of times on the barbecuing circuit, a professional, competitive circuit, generally the competitors will go to the mom and pop place, or they'll go right to the slaughterhouse or even the farm itself if they have an inroads. A couple things we want to look at here, though, too, is this is what we call the fat cap. The fat cap should be on one piece of meat, or on the top side of the meat. On the bottom side, we should see relatively more of the pink or the flesh itself. We also see here a little bit of the marbling, and when I take the bag off, we'll see a little bit more, but generally speaking, we should have a good amount of fat in here. If I hold this up, notice it's not limped over. That also means that's a good amount of fat in there that's holding it up. If it limped over more, that would mean the meat was probably a little bit leaner, didn't have as much internal fat marbling in there, and that's going to cut down on the flavor quite a bit. Also, on the flip side, we don't want one necessarily perfectly stiff. If it was perfectly stiff and didn't have any give or take at all, that probably means it was frozen or it's a high fat content in there. One of the things that we want to do here in a few minutes is I'm going to take this out of the bag, I'm going to rinse it off, pat dry it, and then we'll talk about trimming it off. Another thing I want to point out is the uniformity of the meat from one end to the other, and what I mean by that is its overall thickness. Notice it's pretty much even from one end to the other, which is another thing that we're looking for, because if it was uneven, it would also cook and smoke unevenly. A thinner side would cook faster, it would probably dry out, and it might even have a tendency to burn, whereas a thicker end would take a lot longer to cook, and it might still even be raw in certain areas there if we didn't cook it long enough. And since on the smoker we want to maintain a constant temperature of about 250 degrees, give or take, we want to make sure that this thing cooks evenly. Now, because of the size here, what I'm probably going to end up doing is cutting this in half. And one thing you can know about beef brisket is if you get a good fresh piece of beef brisket, and especially if you have a vacuum sealer at home, you can seal and vacuum up one of these and stick it back in the freezer, and it could last upwards of a year. However, I don't necessarily recommend that. Definitely the longer it's going to be in the freezer, the more it might be susceptible to freezer burn or crystallization, but definitely, you figure in the summertime you might break it out in a couple of months. But if it was me personally, I probably wouldn't want to freeze a piece of meat for more than 6 months. However, again, because of the size of this and because of the cooking for my friends and my neighbors, I might cut this down in half here in a few minutes when we get to that portion of it there. And two things are going to happen that way. One, I'm going to let a little bit more air circulation and smoking circulation to go on inside the smoker grill itself. And number two, it's going to be easier to handle. Instead of using 2 sets of tongs on my smoker grill, I could easily pick one side up with one set of tongs, flip it, whatever I have to do, and then maneuver the other one with the same set of tongs. So it's just going to be easier for me to move around. So I'll get back here in a second. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove this from the bag, and we're going to talk about trimming the fat.